Hello there, and welcome to this week's Old School RuneScape Q&A. I'm your host, Mod Tween, and I am joined by Mod Husky.
Here.
Mod Rock.
Hello.
Mod Ash.
Hello.
And Mod Gambit.
Hello.
We've also got Mod Tide on the chat, so at Old School RS, should you have any questions you'd like us to answer. And we've got Mod John in the studio making things happen. Thank you very much, Mod John. I will begin with the usual announcements and hot topics, whatever you like to call them. So high scores, then they're not working, haven't been working since December. That shouldn't be the case. We don't want it to be the case. We made a change last week and it didn't work. We're still trying to identify the specific problem and solution. We have found another solution which could work. We're aiming to launch it in the next couple of weeks to see if that helps. But we are working on it. As players, it's quite annoying not to be able to see the high scores. And as staff for the old school game, we know you want to see the high scores.
Mod Genesis mentioned something that's about the tech going on there. Turns out that the reason the boss high scores hit it so badly in a way that skills don't normally is that it's the first time we've launched high scores for something where lots of people already have very high numbers. And the system was never designed to expect that and has not handled it at all well. So I guess he's been looking into whether he can optimise it so it handles these situations a lot better. I mean, just from his description of what the code's doing, there are things that it could be doing differently. Not his fault, by the way. He did not write this thing. He inherited it from decades ago when it was written to just handle skills rather than what we're trying to use it for now. Or if they can't, then we're aware there's an option of getting shot at the boss high scores, although that in itself is quite a big work for the tech team, apparently, because the system was never designed to have things deleted either, because it was assumed we'd never want to delete a skill from the game. Anyway, that's all the tech I know about it. I'm afraid it's not something our team can help them do faster or better, but they will do what they can.
Yeah, we'll look to keep you updated as we get the information. Let's talk about this Volcano drop table. So last week's update affected the rarity of a few different things, like tool seed and ore. Tomorrow's update will bring further changes, and it's Mod Husky, you said you had some insight on the tool seeds, I believe?
Yeah, I can't remember what we're changing the drop rate to, but uniques are going to be a bit more common than the change last week. We've also moved the Volcano shard off that unique table. It's now a separate role, similar to pets, so that when you do land on a unique, I think it's either pretty much going to be a tool seed and a rare chance and onyx. So the onyx is still there, it's just going to be like that. I can't remember what the exact rate is. I think somewhere in like 200 to 300 maybe, ballpark.
If we don't mind sharing the rates, then it was changed to 1 in 200 down from 1 in 5.
Cool, 1 in 200, cool. Yeah, the content's been out for a while. I don't mind the players knowing that. So yeah, hopefully that'll address some of the issues, and I don't know what changes Ed has made to the standard drop table, if any.
I believe there's less mithril, something that players have commented on quite a lot because the availability of the ore was leading to gems.
Yeah.
It was mithril, gold and silver, I believe.
Yeah, so we did reduce the frequency of dropping last week, but we've also made further changes to it this week as well. Cool, I think that covers that. The Gazette, so last week we launched the Gielinor Gazette, which is a new monthly blog. So there's been some really good feedback and reception, and the reception to it's been positive so far. Some really cool Posty Pete artwork. So ! Gazette to see last week's one. In terms of your feedback, what we're looking to do in future editions, starting next one with March, is kind of tackle meteor topics, give you a lot of an update on progress on all active projects, likely in the form of like a short form table at the top or bottom of each blog, so you know what we're working on and where we are with that project. And it might be in the case of stuff like Group Ironman, it's locked behind clans, which is locked behind engine work. It's still coming, but not just yet.
Regarding that, the good thing is I've seen quite a lot of components from the engine team put into code review from their peers, which is a pretty direct sign of progress. What I don't know is how many more components there are involved in the darn thing, so I don't know whether they're... I know they've done a lot, I don't know how much more there is, but I suspect there's quite a lot, given the nature of it and what it took for them to do in 2011.
Yep, so we'll look to include those types of progress updates. Accounts made using the Game Center, so playing on iOS and Apple, they've been unable to link their account to an actual RuneScape login email for quite some time. It's something we're working on. So the thing is, with a mobile update, it has to be developed by us, tested by us, but also approved by Apple. So I haven't forgot about it. We're aiming to get that update out soon to allow you to link your Game Center account to your RuneScape login accounts, which means you can also play on desktop in addition to playing on mobile.
But since there's a dependency that's kind of outside of the studio, it's hard for us to promise any dates with that. Sorry.
Let's talk a little bit about PvP. So there's been lots of really, really promising discussion and vision work, which will feed into an overall roadmap. We're not quite ready to publish what this roadmap looks like just yet, because frankly, we're still working on it. What it's about is, when we publish it, we want to be able to explain why we're doing what we're doing, kind of what led us to it, and also when you can expect the updates we're looking to offer. It's like a really firm roadmap of month by month when updates are coming. Like I said, we're not in a position to do this just yet. It's about making sure we put the right resource in places to deliver what it is you want us to deliver. There have been hundreds of suggestions from you for content, which we'll look to incorporate into the roadmap if they fit. And if you have any more, then !PvP ideas for a chance to submit those.
Yeah, I think most of us here have been reading through some of those, and I just want to say thank you to the guys who have submitted those ideas. It really has helped us as developers as well, who working on stuff, to validate our designs against them and say, why are you guys asking for this? What is the sort of root cause of the problems? And I think one of the things that's interesting is it's not just introduce a new piece of content and it's done, right? I think that's what your roadmap is kind of outlining, right? We want a vision for what this looks like long term, so that we can address all types of PvPers, essentially.
Yeah, exactly. So coming to the end of the announcements, apologies, just a few more. Old School RuneScape is turning 7 years old. That's on Saturday. So what are we doing to celebrate? Tomorrow, there's a game update coming to game. We've teased on social media the types of things you can expect to come with it.
I think we can also confirm, Dr. Seuss in the chat was asking earlier, will it come with the half jugs of wine? Yes, it will come with the half jugs of wine.
Excellent. Yep, so that game update will arrive, assuming no problems, at 11:30 a.m. UTC tomorrow. And then on Friday the 21st at 4 p.m. UTC, there's a special live stream, which a few of us on the couch will be on. We'll be talking about the kind of major events and updates for the last 7 years. There'll be a birthday event playthrough, so you might want to hold off completing the event and join us for that. There'll be a data stream, and the data stream is looking awesome. We've got a lot of help from our creative team in making the slides look nice and pretty. And big thanks to Mod Nasty for giving us the data to work with. And there'll also be some JMod hide and seek. So we're looking at about 4 p.m. UTC to around 6 p.m. UTC. So do make sure you join us for that on Friday. What next? So questions. So we'd like to give you a way to ask your questions in a place where they won't be buried amongst others like they currently are on Reddit or Twitter. So if you questions, it'll link you to a form where you can submit a question, and we'll be able to see it without it being perhaps downvoted or just lost amongst the hundreds and thousands of comments and tweets we see. We won't be answering them live as we get them, but as we get the questions, we will look to answer them in the next stream. There's also an opportunity for you to give us your RSN if we feel like we want a bit more context or talk about the question in more detail, but we'd only ever contact you via your in-game meta center for the purpose of this. Near coming to an end of the announcements, so Dark Mayor. Maya?
Maya.
Mayor, yeah.
Mayor. Okay.
Maya.
Meyer?
Maya.
I've always pronounced it Dark Meyer. And then I got in trouble for the RuneFest now, so I was saying Dark. I was told to say Dark Mayor, so it was consistent. I think it's Ed says Mayor and everyone else thinks it's Meyer.
Mayor's in town, Mayor.
Yeah.
Well, the thing about a mire is it's a kind of swamp like Mort Mire, so it felt like a nice touch on that. On the other hand, it is spelt Mayor.
Yeah.
Anyway, that piece of content that we announced at RuneFest. Next week there'll be a blog coming talking about the game content that you'll be voting on. It's pretty much a recap of the stuff we announced at RuneFest, including things like Dark Gracewall, and also there's a stream next week. If you'd like to talk to us a bit more about that.
Yeah, so I've been thinking about ideas. We had a sort of, we call it level up, essentially. We had a bunch of talks and people talking about ways that maybe we could work better, things we could improve in the sort of development process. And one of the things that I sort of listened to and agreed with is we don't really get a chance for feedback until really late in the design process. Often it's weeks before the content is due out. And especially with a piece of content which I'm going to be working on next, the Hallowed Sepulchre, all we've kind of given the players is it's agility like you've never done it before, like no more clicking round laps. And when you've got to vote on that in a blog, it's pretty difficult to vision that, right? Even if we give a description of what it is. So next week, I'm going to be showing you guys kind of 2-ish weeks of work on it with just like placeholder grey box assets kind of showing what the mechanics of it's going to be, so you guys have a better idea of what to vote on, and so that you guys can give your feedback on the earlier design, right? The idea is it's going to be quite click intensive agility, so maybe the feedback is that this is not what you'd like, maybe it is what you'd like. We're also going to show off some of the concept arts and story behind it so that you guys can maybe give feedback on what you think it should look like and stuff like that. So yeah, it's just kind of incorporating the design process throughout, you know, as opposed to right at the end. Because we do give a lot of internal feedback and reviews ourselves. It's just, I'd like to give you guys the chance to do that. So hopefully this works. I can preach to the other content developers to try and do this with content they're working on as well where appropriate. I think it'd be quite cool. And yeah, excited to see how that goes.
I think it's also about us being better at planning playtests and player visits and other sorts of player validation well in advance. And what I'm quite keen to do is, whilst we're doing playtests, is actually sharing the outcome with the wider community, saying, okay, these are the players we brought in, if they're open to be named. This is the feedback they gave us. This is what we've changed accordingly. So you know why we've made certain changes during the development process. Cool, and up to the last announcement, and as a segue into the next section. So last week we published a blog about def mechanics and changes we'd like to make. ! Def to see that blog. We've got some few slides we'd like to talk to, mainly we'd like to cover the fact that since we published the blog, we've actually made a number of changes based on your feedback. So if you could bear with us, and perhaps let's pretend you hadn't read the blog initially and come at it with a clear mind. And we'll take a look at the changelog at the top to see what has changed and then tackle the blog accordingly. So
yeah, because certainly some of the comments I've seen in the chat refer to the first draft, which was changed, well, nearly a week ago now. So there's definitely a few things to pick up on.
Yeah, so cool. I've got a clicker somewhere. So yeah, as the first slide says, ! Def in the chat to see the blog. Perhaps you'd like to read through it whilst we talk about it. That'd be a nice community experience for us, won't it? A bit like story time.
No, I think you've structured the slides in about the same way as the blog.
That was intentional. Cool. What's first? Let's talk about motivations for why we're doing it. Generally, we think it's good for the game if we restore more risk to def. We conducted a survey, and it revealed that players agreed there was a need for more risk. We've made previous changes to the def mechanics unpolled, and they were in response to malicious attacks. And I'd just like to point out perhaps why we're not so keen on returning to the 2-minute, quite harsh timer of losing items. That's because despite any amount of money and resource you put into your infrastructure, no game studio can ever guarantee full service 100% of the time. And I know from a player's perspective, it might sound like a bit of a cop-out, but on Twitter, when I've been talking to the players, I kind of pointed to the fact that EVE Online have been enduring, I think, about 12 days worth of DDoSing now. As recently as September, WoW Classic were tackling DDoSing. And even aside from malicious attacks, Final Fantasy XIV launched their major patch yesterday, I believe. And they've had quite a lot of service problems just as players are trying to get into the game. And I'm not trying to put shade on these games. It's just more spotlight on the fact that lots of different games face infrastructure issues despite the scale of their business and scale of the studio, and regardless of the resource you put into place. So we do invest in the servers. They are a hell of a lot stronger than they were when we first made the changes, but still not in a position for us to say definitely 100% of the time they are immune to attacks. There's also more options available to us now than when we first made the unpolled changes, such as making graves appear on any world. And lastly, it's not about us punishing new players. And the next slide talks about the changes we've made. So perhaps those changes we've made since we first published the blog would alleviate any concerns about us punishing new players or players learning how to tackle certain bits of content. So the major changes since we first published the blog, we've changed the fees for permanent item reclamation. So initially, where we were proposing changes to the fees for Thorfinn, for Warcraft, the Theatre of Blood Chest, Volcanic Mine, we've got rid of those. They remain as they were before, but we have introduced a new fee for Zulrah, but only for players with 50+ kill count. So players who are learning how to tackle the boss aren't going to be punished with brand new item reclamation fees. Instead, you'll only tackle those, or you only face those and have to pay for it once you've got 50 kills and you're in a position to have, you've learned it, you're making money from it. If you die, then really you can afford to pay the fees.
It also means that players worried that they wouldn't be able to provide teaching services around the Theatre of Blood Well, there's no change there, so if you could do it before, you'll still be able to do it.
Yep.
Back to you, I guess.
Sure, yeah, okay, carry on. In the blog, there's also a new concept called the Death's Coffer. We'll talk a bit more about that later on, and that's in response to concerns about how Iron players would get cash to pay the fees. But like I said, we'll talk more about that in upcoming slides. We also clarified how ornate items will work in instances of non-PvP deaths.
Specifically, we clarified that they would not lose their ornate status, and they would not break or anything outside of PvP. You keep it, and it stays ornate. It means that the ornate kits which were originally pitched as just a cosmetic upgrade for the flexing, will have quite a benefit, but that's not exactly new behaviour, and it was of concern to quite a few people in the first draft.
I'm seeing in the chat as well questions about people teaching other players in Theatre of Blood and confusing that with the 50 kill count requirement we've listed there. Perhaps it's not so clear in the slide, but the 50 kill count fee would only come into place for Zulrah. Everything else listed there, like Torfin, a Theatre of Blood, and Volcanic Mine Reclamation, aren't affected by the 50 kill count. They remain as they are. And then lastly, for the blog changes, there's a bit more clarification about items that have been locked by the Truva
Parchment, specifically to clarify that they also stay protected. They stay Truva locked to you, so you're not risking them as such. I suppose we could pronounce it Trouve like the French, but Truva looks right in this language.
I'm sure a joke could be made about Brexit or something like that. But for the rest of the changes, !death, you'll see the blog, and at the very top of the blog is a changelog. I think there are 2 sections of a changelog according to which day we made the changes.
Yes, the 17th and the 19th. 14th and 19th. MX Girl was asking whether Theatre of Blood would be changing the updates. We can say for a third time, it will not be changing in this update.
Cool. Right, so we'll move on to the mechanics now that we've covered the changes since the blog was first published. The core mechanics, a very brief overview, is that natural deaths, i.e. in non-PvP, will result in a gravestone appearing where you die. Trailable items will appear on the gravestone, and they can be reclaimed by reaching the gravestone within the time limit. Your 3 or 4 with protect item activated, items will be unaffected and won't appear on the gravestone. They will be in your inventory, and untradeable items will also move to the gravestone and will not break, adding to the reclaim fee. Next up, so gravestone information. So gravestones will appear on whatever game world you log into, and they will also persist over game reboots. So currently, when you die, you can only you'll only be able to reclaim your items on the floor on the game world you died on, and also if the game happens to update or reboot, sorry, tough luck, you've lost them. So the changes we're making are adding gravestones which will appear on whatever game world you log into and will persist over game reboots.
Which is quite useful for people who actually can't remember what game world they were on, which happens quite often. Rather than having to hunt around really quickly and try to find which world it was, you just go to wherever the place was, and there's your stuff on the world you're now on. Likewise, even quite experienced players, and indeed some of our staff, have been known to get caught short when dying shortly before a server reboot. So apparently it will help even experienced players for this one.
So, well, John, it looks as though players are complaining about audio issues. Can we hear anything or have anything like that?
Someone's mic is doing something, but it's only happened twice.
Okay.
I think it's Gambit.
Could be mine. I'll be more careful.
It's that fancy jacket, perhaps? It's
Perhaps.
a very nice jacket.
Oh, thank you very much. A couple of the players have commented on it.
You're advertising them.
I will say a little bit more about it after the presentation, if people would like.
Yeah, so we'll talk about death a little bit more, and then we'll sell out some merch, shall we? So back to the gravestones. If you were to die in a PvP world, that would result in a gravestone appearing only on PvP worlds. This is to avoid you bypassing the risk of you dying on a PvP world and then going to a safer world to reclaim your items. Similarly, dying on a Deadman world will result in a gravestone appearing only on a Deadman world. It's worth noting that at this moment in time, there is only one Deadman world anyway, but in future, when Deadman returns, if you were to die on a seasonal Deadman world, then it would appear on any other seasonal Deadman world. A member who dies in members-only areas and runs out of membership would need more membership credit to be able to reclaim the gravestone. That's always been the case. If you were to die now and then lose membership in the time of you dying and logging out, then you wouldn't be able to log into the membership world. So that's not a new change. Gravestone, it will usually be within a few map tiles of where you died, except, so if you were to die in an instanced area without an item reclamation feature, that would result in a gravestone spawning outside of the instanced area.
This covers a lot of quests. Bonewielder was asking about it in the chat, for example. Take, I think Recipe for Disaster's got a section where you go into a cave with snakes and you bake a big snake on a hot rock or something. A lot of that, for whatever reason, was instanced, and even a dev playing through that content won't always realise, oh, I'm in an instance now. So you're in fact risking everything you carry, and you don't know it. We'd like to move those outside of the instance to wherever you were standing before you went into it, most likely. We've handled a few exceptional cases where the place you were standing before entering the instance is inaccessible, like the Tithe Farm and the Piscator's fishing colony, for people in the middle of the quest. But we think this would be a lot fairer than the current situation where, just because it's one of these instances rather than any other piece of content, everything's completely gone and there's no chance of retrieval ever.
Mm-hmm. And I'm seeing in the chat a few players sharing their personal experience of losing items in instanced areas. I DC'd when I completed Recipe for Disaster years ago. That was
Evil chicken lair will do it.
Mm-hmm. Okay, and we're also willing to move gravestones outside of boss rooms in the event of dying in God Wars, but we're happy to poll this one. I don't think we're particularly precious about it. We're happy to go with whatever the players would prefer there. And like we said earlier, places like Volcath, Volcanic Mine will continue working as they do now, so there won't be a gravestone appearing. It will be with the NPC or with the chest.
And the fee stays the same.
Yep.
With the exception of Azura, which is getting one, but only for people who have killed it 50 times. I saw someone in the chat earlier saying that that's not good because if you die 50 times, you still aren't any close to learning to kill it. That's not what the blog says. It actually says that you have to kill Azura 50 times before the fee applies. And after you've killed it 50 times, hopefully you can kill it 51 times and more.
It's you that needs the kill count, not Zulrah.
Correct. Yes. Tempting though it is to punish you for dying so much, no, we're counting your kills of Zora.
So, other item retrieval systems, I think we've covered this quite extensively already, but hell, another slide anyway. So, fees for death at Volcath, Theatre of Blood, Frontic Exiles, Grotesque Guardians, Volcanic Mine, and others will remain unchanged, but we are adding a fee to the retrieval services of Princess Zol, what's her name, and it will only apply to players with kill count of 50 plus to avoid impacting new players who are learning, and the fee will be 100k to match the Volcath reclamation. Cool, next. Let's talk about how different items will work. So food and potions will go to your gravestone, but dying a second time will make the food and potions drop to the floor, like a supply pile, because we know some players play like that now. They die intentionally to give themselves more supplies for the future.
Yeah, it was never an intended feature of death that would allow that, but to be honest, we don't have a pressing reason to nerf it, and we're willing to try and accommodate it in this update.
Sorry, I see a player asking in the chat, are we counting Zulrah kills before or after the update?
It's looking at the kill count on the high scores.
Yeah, so as they are now.
Yeah, assuming it could get to the high score. It doesn't depend on the high scores being visible.
But we are making the assumption there that in the time that it comes to the update, you haven't forgotten how to play Zulrah content. So other items, so items which degrade or lose charges on death would instead go to your gravestone without degrading or losing charges, if I'm reading that properly.
That's right. In an earlier version of the blog, items that could break would break. We felt, well, players weren't too happy about it, and we agreed that the fees for repairing them were quite disproportionate to the rest of the update. So the most recent change to the blog, now on the website, !death, clarifies that these items do not break, and they will go to your gravestone.
Cool. Yep, untradeable items will also go to your gravestone, and items enchanted with the Truva or Truve parchment would remain in your inventory, or they remain equipped without breaking or losing their
locked status.
Yeah, locked status. And items which are destroyed, like certain quest items, will still be destroyed, so no changes there. Let's talk about Ironman deaths. So, regular and hardcore Ironman will be treated the same as the non-Iron players, main accounts. The only exception is a 50% reduction to the grave reclamation or deaths office fees, depending on which which solution we choose to put in place for dying. For Ultimate Ironman, in regular circumstances, this is largely the same as before. Tradable items still drop to the ground, disappearing after an hour. logged in or not. I think that's probably for the point just before that. And they would only appear on the world where the ultimate Ironman died. Lost permanently if the world reboots, so no changes there. In PvP, items will be dropped on the ground for the PK to see, and untradables will break, as well as dropping gold for the PK. Cool. Deaths in PvP. So we've spoken a lot about how it would work in non-PvP. So in terms of PvP, food and potions will drop. Food and potions will drop in the loot pile. Some items turn into cash upon death, like the barrel chest anchor. That will also join the loot pile. And some untradable items break. Coins are going to be added to the loot pile with the amount matching the repair cost.
Yeah, it's worth noting that that's not actually a change. The reason it was spelled out in the blog is partly that we've almost never written down what the death behaviour is in the game over the last several years. And since this update involves a lot of death changes, we thought it would be a rather good thing to have the blog explain all the various different behaviours there are and enumerate them. So the fact that things like the anchor turn into cash on death is not a new thing at all. That dates back to like 2007. We've mentioned it here to clarify that it is still going to happen.
So there aren't really any significant changes to deaths in PvP?
Well, there is one there, which is previously when you got loot from someone because they had an untradable break, the number of coins you would get were 75% of the repair cost. We've now changed that to match the repair cost. You're getting 100% of that value, just because we don't think that's a necessary cash sink.
Mm-hmm. Cool. So this is a suggestion for how we implement death mechanics. So Death's Office. So what we're proposing is a way of reclaiming items without the time limit, similar to Death's Office at RS3. For the extra convenience and the safety that this would provide, we'd raise the fee for reclaiming your items to 5% for items worth 100,000 GP and above. Anything below that wouldn't incur a fee. This could be an extension to the Gravestone system, with items going here if the time limit runs out. And it could be accessed via mausoleums near the main respawn points, like Lumbridge Graveyard, a White Knight Crypt, or Edgeville's Coffin area. I really like that kind of thematic approach. How does it fit in? There's a portal, isn't there, in RS3, in Draenor?
Something of the sort,
Something
yes.
like that, yeah.
Possibly based on where Halloween events used to get put back in the day, because they were close to Port Sarim, but we often put a dark portal just around that area with actual darkness as you walk closer to it. They may have gone with that kind of design. But since we've got different spawn points used quite widely, having one near each of the spawn points the same way that Purdu appears made sense for this.
Mm-hmm. Another suggestion is Death's Coffer. So this was in response to a player suggestion to add a potential item sink to the game. So here you could sacrifice unwanted items, and Death would then put 105% of a GE value into a coffer, and then you can use that coffer to pay for your gravestone and any other retrieval fees, excluding the volcanic mine. Mm-hmm. You could not withdraw the coins from the coffer, so even though it offers 105% of the GE value, don't see that as free money. You cannot get that cash back. It's only going to be used for deaths.
Can we clarify something on the last slide? I'm seeing chat not understand.
Okay, sure.
You said 5% of the value of items over 100k. I think that was a banding for in the death adding thing to the coffer. It's not saying you're 5% of your scythe's value. It's 5% extra for what the scythe would cost, right? In the system. I'm not sure if I've explained that well.
Just for the previous slide.
I think you lost me there, sorry.
So items over 100k cost a certain amount to reclaim in the Gravestone system. If you go to Death's Office, it would be 5% more of that value, not of the item's value. Is that correct?
That was not correct.
Oh, okay, so chat is right. Okay.
So it's 5% off the item.
Yeah. Yes.
Right, okay.
And you would be able to pay from Death's Coffer for it.
Okay.
Okay. People asking why 105% of the GE value for the coffer offerings. The reason for that is so that you have an incentive to use it for this rather than sell it on the Grand Exchange.
Yes, the purpose of it was partly that Iron players deal mostly with items rather than with coins. I mean, they can get coins, but not in the same way that a main can by going to the GE. So by letting them turn unwanted items into payment for gravestones and payment for death, there'd be an opportunity to get some of the stuff out of the game and let the Iron players pay their fees more with what they've got. We'd also allow mains to do it, of course, and like we said, it's slightly higher, so there's a slight incentive to do it. But Death would refuse to accept anything that he considered to be cheap junk. So anything under 10k would not go into his coffer. We do expect that people will find ways of manipulating this slightly by putting things in that aren't really worth that much. On the other hand, they would have to at least get them first, and that would be at least activity. And we would also keep an eye on the on inappropriately priced items and adjust them as necessary.
Yeah.
For people who are sort of terrified of paying 50 mil to reclaim a T-bow, yes, try not to die while risking the most expensive items in the game.
Chances are your T-bow will always be protected.
And you're probably
anyway.
protecting them anyway.
Yeah, so if your T-bow is one of the items, or your scythe ended up in this in the first place, it begs the question what you did protect.
Took 4 scythes.
Yeah, well, you can probably afford it then.
Well, yeah, I think it's a lot of the case of unless you're on a high-risk world, which obviously has the slightly different deck mechanics, that's where you'll perhaps have more items than you'd have expected.
So also, if you got to your gravestone within the time limit, which I think is 15 minutes, which gives you time to get to quite a lot of places, you wouldn't end up with this fee, because the items would be in the gravestone where the fee is a lot lower. But if you couldn't get to wherever it was in 15 minutes, then rather than the items going into oblivion and being lost forever, you've got this slightly more expensive approach. Now, we know it's a bit harsher than the current situation where basically everything you get back, unless you were in those particular kinds of instances that don't have a chest. But we do think the game needs a bit more risk.
It is worth adding that this idea was something that was like after the 15-minute timer. So if you did get there within the 15 minutes, whether you're logged in or not, so when you are logged in, then you'd only get the increased costs if you were too slow, basically. And almost everywhere is quite easy to get to within 10 minutes. I think the hardest bits are areas of Isofdar before you have completed Regicide, because you have to run through the underground pass, but pretty much almost everywhere in game is rather easy to get to at this point.
Yeah.
And we see a lot of split even in the chat and in replies to the blog, where it's a lot of distinction between players who want to see more risk and want Old School to be more challenging, and players who are quite happy with the current easy way of playing. In terms of what's next, so we're going to keep reviewing feedback and making changes accordingly. If you hit !death, you can read the blog and see that there's already been 2 major changes. Check the chain logs at the top. We'll also be conducting an in-game opinion poll. We're going to use this to gauge whether or not the mechanics, you prefer the mechanics from the Old School era or RS3's version, or perhaps something between the two. And I think below are the types of questions we'll be asking. Oh, great, yeah.
Do remember, we read a lot of feedback, and as far as the actual system itself, feedback on that is more so, I would say, it's more meaningful than some of the numbers. Numbers can easily change even during development and post-release, but the system itself is obviously the hard part and most of the work with that. So feedback on that specifically is very much appreciated. And I mean, people say 5% too much. We could, agree mid-development, say 2%. Sure. We could say 3%. We could say 0.5%.
We could say 10%.
We could say 10%, right? The number can just easily change.
Cool. I think this is the last slide, in which case that is the death mechanic proposal, !death to take a read of the blog. It offers a lot more detail than the slides did, but we just wanted to kind of emphasize the changes we've made since it was first published.
I see somebody has suggested we could have said 73.
We could have. You mean you could pay 73% of your T-bow's value to get it back?
Not just 73 mil per item.
Yeah.
Also saw what I thought was a hilarious comment when you mentioned the 4 scythes. Somebody typed Bruce 4 scythes.
That went through my head after I said it.
I'll take some questions from the chat quickly. So Handsome John asks, John, did you put this on? Does this mean it's safer to die to Skatizo now? Like your stuff isn't lost forever if you die in there anymore?
Yeah, because it would appear in a grave outside Skatizo's cave, up in the catacombs.
But there would be a fee.
There would be a fee.
What would happen with chins?
At the moment, we've changed chins a couple of weeks ago, I think it was, so in PvP areas so that they can be looted. Now, currently they're set to just be destroyed on a PVM death so that you never get them back. We didn't have a pressing reason to change that, but we could.
No, I'm of the opinion where I think it should stay how it is now, rather than...
Well, I personally expect to leave them alone. It ain't set in stone, but it's not something that's been coming up a lot over the years that, people die to a monster they didn't get their chins back. If that has been a big drama in the community, I'm afraid I missed it.
One thing I do like about the solution is like questions like, does it affect Scottizo? I mean, yeah, any instance will work, and it's such a cleaner approach instead of having the dev have to count for every single potential instance they may use, whether it's for a little part of a quest or mini game or whatever they end up doing.
Yes, I think when Dragon Slayer 2 came out, the dev was asked to hotfix in a warning, like, you are about to enter an area where items cannot be retrieved on death.
Yeah, that was for the dungeon immediately after killing Vorkath.
Yes, I'm not sure why.
Someone went in there and was poisoned and promptly... They didn't have anything on them, but they died while in there and live streaming.
It's not about making it easier for us, it's just about the case of not forgetting, and accidentally causing someone to lose items because of an oversight. I know I had to do it for the Shaded Beast in the Forthos dungeon. I had to put a warning, even though it's a very trivial fight, but just because the player may not realise they're about to be taken into an instance by pressing yes in this dialogue.
Yes, and the Cave Kraken private option has been a cause of complaints from time to time. Right. So I think this will help that.
So we've about 20 minutes left. We've got a lot of questions I'd like to race through. First of all, Modrock, would you like to talk to us about Game Blast and we'll bid farewell to Mod Ash? I believe you need to shoot off.
Afraid so.
So, Mod John, could you put the image up for us, please?
So what's happening this weekend is Game Blast weekend. While Jagex as a company are not taking part in our 24-hour event like we have done over numerous years, there are members of the community for both RuneScape and Old School that are giving up their time to essentially do a chain stream, so every couple of hours it moves on to the next person, in order to try and raise as much money for charity as we can. There's a few Golden Gnome winners in there, like Grommy Arts and the RS guy. You've got a couple of former and current staff members that are going to be in there as well. While there isn't necessarily like the massive big names you see on top of Twitch, I'm sure I can try and pester a few of them to put a link somewhere here and there. But it's just essentially a group of people that we want to get together and try and raise some money for Game Blast and Special Effect to try and help those who are unable to play games to essentially be able to play them. Special Effect is an amazing cause, one that Jagex has supported for a number of years. So if you do have some time, just stop by any of those streamers who are streaming that weekend. A few of us have been given access to be on the front page of Twitch as well. I think out of the 20 streamers, almost half of us are going to have an hour each on the front page over the 40 hours.
Amazing.
Awesome.
So Twitch are getting behind us for it as well. Becky, who works for Special Effect, has been absolutely amazing in sorting everything else out for us. Tracy gets all the love in the world for the work that she does. So if you have time, please do stop by. And if you can donate, please do as well. It would mean everything to us that are taking part.
Cool. Thank you very much. Yeah, make sure you do tune in for that. So in terms of Ash, he's actually just gone to leave early for his interview with Shawnee a little bit later on. He'll be back in the office tomorrow, don't worry. Right, we've got a lot of questions to race through. I saw a person in the chat ask, is this a Q&A or an announcement stream? I'd like to apologise, but with such a big topic like death mechanics, surely you'd rather us take the time to talk through the mechanics, especially when there's a lot of, I won't say confusion, but a lot of questions surrounding it.
Yeah.
If I can delay the questions by 60 more seconds and answer the players' questions regarding the jacket. Yes, so you may have noticed I'm wearing sort of varsity style black and grey jacket today, and this will be available on the merch store as of tomorrow, I believe, with tomorrow's update. A couple of other items that we are also releasing. I think there's a pin and a key ring. One of them is very commemorative for the 7-year anniversary, but we'll be showing that off on the birthday stream instead. But yeah, just wanted to give you guys a quick peek of this one. Obviously, it's got the RS stones on the sort of left side of the chest there. If you guys like it, I think they're going to be £45 available as of tomorrow. Before you decide if you want it or not, though, normies will have to note that there is a Ironman helmet on the back. I don't know if I've got. I'll show. All right, I'll show it. So it looks like this on the back. Is that a good shot? You see that? Yeah.
Yeah.
So there's been some mixed feelings. There's been some mixed feelings about that in the office. So what we're looking for is your guys' feedback. If you like it, great. If you don't, let us know about that, and maybe offer a different idea for what the back could look like, or maybe if you want it plain.
I'm sure it wouldn't be hard to change the sleeves to a red to have a hardcore one, or remove the symbol off the back entirely.
Exactly.
Just
Dye the back black, get rid of that.
I think it's perfect as is. I see no problems.
Yeah, so keep an eye out for this. If you like it, it's going to be available as of tomorrow morning.
Fantastic. Buy merch. Questions. Let's do some of those in the time we've got left. First of all, could the level up pop-up menu be reopened by clicking the level up message in the chat box or similar? The menu is often closed automatically by combat or some other action, so we can't see what's been unlocked without opening the skill guide and manually checking.
If we're going to do a system like this, I think I'd rather take on what RuneScape added in 2009, where the symbol of the skill itself would flash. But from what I understand, in order to do that, that means a complete overhaul of our skill guide system and the level up system that approaches it, which doesn't say that it's not impossible. It doesn't say it is impossible. There's just a lot of underlying work involved to be able to do something like that. And I think when they originally released it, it was rewritten. But I think personally that would be something nice for us to tackle. It's always good to see what it is you've unlocked, or if you're doing anything in combat, it always immediately goes away and is never really helpful.
Okay.
Just to feature creep the suggestion, it'd be cool if we could show you when you've unlocked all the requirements for a quest as well, in the same way.
That might take an awful lot more.
Yes, no, I realise that. It would be cool.
But yeah, no, I agree.
Yeah.
Okay. Do you think you revealed the nightmare drop rates too soon?
Personally, I think so.
Okay.
It was up to Ed. It was his content. I believe there was a lot of misconception that the drop rates were a lot higher than they were, which may have sort of influenced his decision to release them early, because I think I saw a lot of community things that they were like 1 in 585, which was probably taken from the corp number, to be honest, for the sigils, which it wasn't. So yeah, I'm not entirely sure if it was the right thing, but it's different. And if, I guess, up to the community, is it something you guys would rather we waited longer, or do you like knowing early? I mean, there's nothing to say that we couldn't just give them on release, right? There's no hard set in stone.
To establish like a set time after every update, whether it's 4 weeks, 6 weeks, 8 weeks, something like that, and then players know when to expect the release of a drop rate, rather than it sometimes being early. Theatre of Blood, didn't we took forever getting those ones out, didn't we?
Yeah.
So I'd like a bit more consistency.
I think it's like ourselves in the office. We all have a different idea. Like me personally, I would like them to never be released, because I like that sense of the unknowing.
It'll upset the wiki guys who know every tiny detail.
I know. But whereas some people like them to know like immediately, so they know how much time and effort they need to put in, etc. So
yeah, I mean, it's that group of people. I mean, Ironman obviously predominantly, but also just completionists, right? When they're looking at content and say, I want to fill that collection log, I want to go for that pet, I want to go for this and prioritize my goals, they kind of want to know
how long it's going to take,
how much the effort is to the reward, right? Yeah. So yeah, we definitely see both sides of the spectrum. I mean, it's kind of sometimes you just have to try it and see how it goes. I think I've always lived by that, you know, it's...
Yeah. I mean, there's definitely some value to like leaving the mystery there for a while, because obviously it changes everything, like pricing, how many people go, that kind of thing, as soon as you declare the actual drop rates. So I don't know if there is a magic number, but if I were to guess, I think maybe something like a month after, or a couple months.
I was going to say, we could
around the right sort of time.
Theoretically, on the next poll we do, put a question at the bottom with 4 options, and we say, at what point do players feel we should release drop rates for content, and put
maybe in a straw poll just to get
2 weeks, 4 weeks, 8 weeks, something like that, and then let the players give us that information as to what it is that we should be doing around drop rates, and then we can have a standardised formula in the future.
Okay.
I'd be interested to see.
Let's get a straw poll up, and in the meantime we'll move on. I think we shared our opinions, so let's crack on with the rest of the questions. Would the team consider re-implementing the classic mini-games like Soul Wars, Stealing Creation and Fist of Guthix? Been asked many times before. The only reason I'm including it in this time is not so much to answer the question directly, but in recent ideation days, I know a few people have been experimenting with kind of how we might port stuff from the other game into our game. So it's not, in terms of considering it, we don't know, but we're messing around with it. And I think we're going to talk a bit more about ideation days in March's Gazette, and it might be that we include some of the progress from these kind of experimentation within that.
I think we also have to kind of look at it why people went to those mini games before, and whether it was people mainly went for the rewards, like the sacred clay tools and things like that, or whether because it felt like there was like hundreds of bots within Soul Wars and people felt they could get their combat XP massively quickly, or things like that. They all kind of have to be taken into consideration when looking at these things too, as to whether it is a genuine thing of, I remember when this was fun, or whether there is that little bit of rose tinting to say, I enjoyed it because of something that didn't necessarily benefit the game.
Yeah.
Mod Gambit and I having a discussion earlier.
Yeah, we did.
Perhaps I'm just cynical and old and grumpy, but for me, people did Soul Wars because it was full of players who perhaps weren't playing, at their computer, and they were training mage by bursting or barraging them on the spawn case to get easy mage XP. And then they were joining friends chats to kind of coordinate when they play. Stealing Creation, I can really distinctly remember no one, when I wanted Sacred the Clay, no one wanted to play Stealing Creation properly. The main worlds were people
draw game CC, wasn't it?
Draw games. If you tried to play, then you'd get kicked from the CC, and then you wouldn't know what world to go to next. Fist of Guthix, I remember people telling you to get off because they wanted to trade wins and that kind of thing. So I think what we want to do is manage that. How can we stop that kind of thing happening? So then the fun can take like central point. Straw poll in the chat to talk about the drop rates, and when we talk about the kind of what period of time we talk about drop rates. Next question: could we get the option to build walls in our player-owned house to fill the holes around the edges?
You'd essentially have to make a blank room that has walls in it, I think. I'm trying to think the last time I went into construction code, and that may have been a while ago. I think it is essentially you're creating a blank room with 4 walls on it.
But then that wouldn't be able to sit in the same space as one of the rooms where you've got it's rotated in such a way that there is.
Yeah. As in that they want the doors that would normally appear to hide those.
Because they've got imagine like you've got an actual house where the edges have just got these big.
You may have to add a location into extra location into every single room in order to do that. And I know that 1 or 2 rooms may not be able to handle that. Ash did, when we did it in 2016, Ash did a massive overhaul of construction to make them massively expandable. And I think he could go up to 8 hotspots, and he said there was the possibility of extending to 9.
Right.
So if that is true, or we haven't done that already, or however it is, I may be misremembering from a few years ago, theoretically, maybe?
The option to build walls in the door, a hotspot to that bit. Yeah.
I think the implementation, we'd have to be very careful about that. It'd be very easy to suddenly drastically increase load times of your house, and we increase the size out. I know players can get quite precious about that.
It's one of those like really nice ideas, but just such a tricky like implementation.
Let's look at how feasible it is, and then what impact. So like Cree in the chat said it takes longer to load the house, and they'd rather not have it. So let's see what we could do, the impact it would have, and then come back to players with it. Okay, so we've got some initial results to the straw poll saying when should we release drop rates. In first place with 35% is 1 month to 3 months. In second place with 21% is 0 to 2 weeks. In third place with 20% is 2 weeks to a month. In fourth place with 6 months plus is 11%. No, backwards. In fourth place with 11% is 6 months plus. And then in last place, which just changed actually, never, 13%. Anyway, I butchered those results, but it looks like the popular consensus is 1 to 3 months.
Yeah, anywhere
Feels
around
about right.
Okay, moving on. Is it possible to consolidate the charges on other jewellery the same way they are for items like the Ring of Recoil and Dodgy Necklace? For example, this would mean teleports on the Amulet of Glory were shared among all the ones you own.
I'm just trying to have to think into the systems here.
You'd essentially have to move it all over to being stored on the player, right? Right now we have different amulets of glory, and they turn into different ones, so they're completely different items.
Does it break anything?
I wouldn't be in a position to say at this point.
Sardude says you need uncharged glories for clues.
It wouldn't work well for the things like the Fountain of Rune as well, because if you can imagine that, right? You store 28, you charge them 28 once. If it charged your glory back up to full, it wouldn't be worth the trip. There's a lot of weird things.
It would make things like the Eternal Glory obsolete.
I know that also one of the things we had when we released the things like the dodgy necklace, because they work differently to every other piece of jewelry that we created before then, because we wanted to make these ones a little bit more user-friendly. The amount of bug reports we get of people saying, I used my dodgy necklace once and it broke. It's supposed to have 8 charges, forgetting they'd used 7 charges on
the other one.
Or something like that.
I think the thing to remember as well is the more charges it has, the more items we need to make, right? Imagine a ring of recoil. You had 40 versions of a ring of recoil, and every time it would change to a different one.
Well, you can make the ring of saffron.
There's potentially 40 rings in your bank.
Okay, so
for one item.
Seems like a sensible idea in theory, but when we actually explore it, perhaps not so
I
practical.
think technically it may be unfeasible.
Okay, next question. Although warding failed, are there plans to update crafting or rune crafting to include ways to create magic robes, to look at imbuing items, and also to provide the item sync that we propose alongside warding?
I would love to take the imbues away from Nightmare Zone. It's finding the right place to put them.
Mm-hmm. Well, we have an enchant spell already in Magic, so maybe there.
I wanted to put the imbues also onto Last Man Standing, and I believe I polled that option. Purely so it gave people a more interactive way of a place to get them. Because in Nightmare Zone, although the combat XP is very helpful, putting them in an additional place, not instead of, which is why I know a lot of people are saying no.
Yeah.
It was just a case of allow people a more interactive way to get them.
The only thing is I kind of just want them gone from the Nightmare Zone, just like everything else.
Oh yeah,
gives.
unless we found a proper place to put them, I wouldn't take them away from the Nightmare Zone and only put them on Last Man Standing. It was like in addition to, because it's more interesting.
I think just removing things from Nightmare Zone has a positive impact on the economy of items as well. If anyone's been watching Red Spider's Eggs, when I think Seracnus was released, they were about 100 each. Now they're pushing like over 1,000-ish.
I think they're just under, when farming them in that Tower of Life.
So even though we introduced a new way to get them by killing that boss.
By moving them out of that shop, which loads of people are going to,
So we put a lot of focus on the imbues, but in terms of the magic robes we proposed, I think that might be worth revisiting as part of crafting and rune crafting. That was the main focus of the question asked as well. So I don't think there are no plans to do it in the near future, but I don't think some of the warding concept had some really good strengths to it.
Yeah, some of those robes are very popular. So.
Okay, next question. A short while ago, you allowed us to dig up herbs before they're grown. To avoid players planting and digging up herbs continuously for XP, we moved the planting XP to the end of the process, joining the harvesting XP. Mm-hmm. This does mean that if the herb dies, the XP is lost. Was this intentional?
Yes.
Yes, we accepted that.
All right, a player called IMCell had a lot of ideas and questions. Just for the sake of this Q&A and the time we've got, I'm going to ask one now, but apologies to IMCell, we'll ask some more in the future. Not so much a question, actually, more a statement, implying a question. You can't unmake normal gloves back into tanned leather. You shouldn't be able to unmake ferocious gloves. It would make the Hydra leather scarcer and more valuable, and committing to owning a pair you can't sell back would act as a small GP sink. What do you guys think to that?
I mean, that probably has what's kept the prayers from Chambers of Xeric as high as they are. Mm-hmm. I personally wouldn't see a problem doing it that way. But given with how many there are now and the fact that it's already been released that way, I think there's a lot of unknowns and issues that could arise when it comes to changing it now. But if that is something that people want in the future when it comes to other content like that, like if we'd have put an orb in a Nightmare Staff and we didn't let you take it out again, would that have been okay? Even though the items are worth hundreds of billions.
I think it depends on the item, like it's a case-by-case thing where it's appropriate to let people reverse the combining or not.
I mean, I'm not even sure why the Ferocious Gloves need to be untradeable in the first place, if I'm being honest. I mean, it was essentially a thematic. The Hydra could have just dropped the gloves.
I think it's because of the requirement for Barrow's gloves.
Right, okay. So you still need to lock it behind Dragon Slayer 2 then, essentially, to get them.
Yeah, you still need to lock it behind RFD.
Cool, that makes more sense.
And everything else.
Okay, so we're not opposed to it, but because of the precedent that's set and the fact that it's already been in game like that, maybe we're a bit hesitant on committing to a change. I'd like to learn more what players feel about reverting stuff to make the components more scarce and, like you said, player said, a bit more valuable. So it means when you're killing Hydra, you're going to make more money. Okay, next question. Is there a way to sort quests by difficulty, or possibly by I have all the requirements? I am close to having all the requirements, and so on. It's quite daunting as a new player looking at the list of all red quests.
I think the problem is we don't really have a metadata for quests.
No, I'm pretty sure. I wonder if I don't know if the wiki either has it or are working on something like this.
I think they already do. The wiki does. You can order it by difficulty. You can order it by length, by name, by how many quest points, whatever is
requirements, sorting by what you've got.
No, I don't think they're that far yet.
I might be making this up, but I think I heard they're working on something like that. If not, maybe it's something they could do, but I can't speak for them, obviously. Otherwise, yeah, it's osrs.wiki to at least filter them by difficulty and see all the other details.
I think the initial thought is like what would happen with wanting to have a flashy icon on the skill guide to tell you what you've unlocked. I think it would require a rewrite of the quest list to add metadata like that to it.
Yeah, I think we probably could do something with the existing system that would say, only show me my uncompleted ones. It would probably still require a lot of work.
Yeah, we could probably like hide the completed ones and things like that a lot easier. But
yeah, for most things, it's easier to just sort of metadata, right? Build the list and tick yes to, on our side essentially. If they've got this set, then don't include the other ones. I don't know. It's essentially just a case of prioritization, right? If that's a big job for the quest list, is there a lot of value to it, perhaps?
I think a lot of these kind of suggestions are a case of input versus value in terms of the amount of other things we could rather be doing.
I mean, the player quite points to new player experience.
No, I fully agree, and we do have people that are more intrinsically looking at the opening game experience.
Yeah.
So that is something we can pass on to them.
I have heard them talk about things like that, what they can do to help quests. I was part of that team for, I think, 3 weeks a while ago, like months ago before I joined the project team. So I know there was discussions there. I don't know where that ended, but it is something that that team could take on.
Well, the same team is still working on adventure paths, which I think were mentioned in the Gazette. They had their own sort of section. If you haven't read it already, please do. And it's quite possible that we'll do a quest themed path in the future, which would give people an introduction to quests, how to complete them, and maybe that would also include information on maybe which ones are good to start with.
Cool. I'd quite like to ask, so we've hit 6 o'clock, but I think since we spent a lot of time on announcements and death mechanics, I want to just run through the last few questions. And on next week, we spoke about the fact there might be a Dark Maya stream and a Suboka stream, but I think we should probably do a Q&A as well, just because it's been a while since we've done some dedicated Q&As. So the last few questions. I think a crystal elven-like POH theme would look really good. What are your opinions? Maybe make it require 1k crystal shards.
Or maybe make it require a future league.
Well, so I like the idea of droppable blueprints or like schematics where, I mean, perhaps if you were to kill an NPC within a certain region, so like Prif or Lezia, or Mauritania, then they drop a tradable or perhaps untradeable blueprint for you to unlock your POH. Could provide a bit of like value to drops for certain NPCs that you don't usually kill. It
would make a sense, like perhaps on the Grotesque Guardians, you could have kind of like a dilapidated Slayer Tower feel and things like that.
Yeah.
I think it's trying to, again, you gauge up the time versus reward sort of aspect. I did end up implementing the house theme for leagues, and I know Mod West spent a lot of time working with those assets, and you wouldn't believe the amount of little bugs that come up with walls clipping with things, windows that have been missed. It is a very expensive thing for us to decide to develop as a reward, and for a big catch for leagues, it ended up working. We could justify it. For big projects, perhaps that takes out from other rewards. It is something that, it is something we like to do. We know players like them, and I know a wall kit that looks like the sort of houses in Prif would look sick. It's just obviously.
Yeah, I mean, I think it was a reward idea that we had for Song of the Elves, but I think it was just maybe cut because, like you say, it's super expensive on graphics, and they already did a lot of work for that project. But maybe the art team scoped it out a bit or had to think about how it might be implemented. So
it's about us could happen in sprint time. From my player's perspective, this is how I feel as a player. every time we release new content, new bosses and stuff, we spend a lot of time on kind of thinking about rewards that are really strong and will drive players to do it and will retain value. But if this was a drop, then we wouldn't need to add like new powerful weapons or new armors all the time. If it's a one-time use consumable, then it would retain value. So from that perspective, it's probably a bit more likely to attach to major projects.
I think it's just a case of how well cosmetics have necessarily done in the past. Would it end up like something on the clue scroll list?
Yeah, perhaps.
Which has got very little value, or do we make it so rare that it has to hold a value?
I mean, if you look at content, right, say, look at the Gauntlet, for example, right? It has the Blade of Sildor, it has the Armor Seeds, which are a weapon with an uncharged version, and then the Seed icon with a bunch of armors, right? It's pretty easy for dev time. It's pretty easy for art. I'm not saying we're trying to cut corners, right? But would you rather have all that or a wall kit which takes a bunch more time? I mean, obviously we could say why not both? Just spend more time, release the project better. But there is sort of a cost versus that. And the Blade of Sildor, I mean, it's holding a value of like 90 mil. Is the wall kit going to have that much if it's rare enough? Perhaps. I guess that's the sort of questions we weigh up.
You would
with
literally
content.
have to balance the rarity as to how much you would want it to hold value.
I mean, ultimately, we want the content to hold value. And the Armor Seeds and the Blade of Sildor, I mean, they hold their value. They do what they need. They do what they do for that wall kit, and they're reasonable rewards. The wall kit probably isn't going to go for that same value. I mean, yes, it could come from any other content as part of a major reward from it. We could allocate for that. I think it's just hard. I mean, it could be that the community just thinks they'd be really happy with content that had a wall kit as the major reward, right?
Yeah.
And
I
we
mean,
could
the thing
go for
is, we can't necessarily assume that the GP value of an item is equal to how much players value or like the thing. That value is also determined by the associated content, right? So how many people are willing to do the gauntlet over and over. The wall kit from Leagues was super popular, right? I don't know how much it actually went for, or is selling for now, but
it was hovering around about 20 mil, maybe 15 to 20
which
mil.
is pretty good for a cosmetic item.
Yeah.
Right?
At the same time, that once people spend their points, they can't get any more in. So that it essentially makes it a time-limited item for a time period.
That's true, but we have promised to make it obtainable again.
Oh, for
with
sure.
Future points. So
Okay, let's move on to another question. We are already overrunning. Could vials of blood be obtained from other sources than Theatre of Blood? What are your thoughts on that? I mean, we've got the Dark Maya expansion. Any possibility of it coming there?
We actually did bring that question up. There are obviously, with the whole city of Darkmere coming out and vampires, there could be reasonably more sources for the Vial of Blood. I think the team just sort of said, no, we kind of like that it's contained within the Theatre of Blood. You don't need too many to run to operate a scythe. It is just used for that scythe. And having a more reliable way to get into it could make it prone to even like things like botting eventually getting in, or players doing things to get it in a larger supply and cause them to not be worth much. It's good just to keep that to Theatre of Blood.
Did we ever allow it so you could take the charges out of the pool?
I don't think so.
You could put the scythe charges back into the pool, but you could not take the pool into the vials. I'm wondering if that would have any difference to put a few more vial bloods, like people who don't want to use their scythe anymore, but have God knows how many hundreds and thousands of charges in the pool to sell them back.
The chat's saying you do get the vials out, so yeah, you can do that.
I'm not 100% sure. I think you can put the scythe vials, the blood, into the pool, but you can't take them out of the pool. But unless someone wants to give me a scythe so I can find out, I'm not able to, I'm afraid.
Cool. Right. So it's 6 minutes past 6. We've overrun a bit. We'll make sure we answer some of the questions we haven't got around to next week. Also, if you hit !questions, there's a new form for you to be able to submit your questions, to be able to avoid your questions getting lost in the mires of Twitter and Reddit and stuff. I'll just run through some more announcements quickly before we wrap up the stream. In terms of high scores, so last week we made a change to try and fix the high scores. It didn't work. We're very sorry about that. But we have another change which could help, and we're looking to launch that in the coming weeks. We are working on it. We want to fix it as soon as possible. Zolcano drop table. Last week we made some changes affecting rarity of tool seed and different types of ore. Tomorrow we're making more changes. That will be covered in tomorrow's game update news post. Last week we launched the Gielenor Gazette, a new monthly blog to talk about lots of different topics, articles, a bit of insight into the team, what we're working on, and any kind of meaty topics such as PvP. I'd expect us to cover that in future blogs. Take a Gazette to take a read of February 1 and give us any feedback you'd like us to consider and implement ahead of March's release. accounts made with the Game Center on iOS and Apple phones, you are currently unable to link your Game Center account to like become a full RuneScape login account to play on desktop. We're working on that. Because it's a mobile update, what happens is it needs to be developed and tested by us and then also improved by the App Store. So we're working on that. We'll get that out as soon as we possibly can. In terms of PvP, so over the course of this month, there's been lots of really promising discussion and like sharing of visions, and I think a lot of alignment about where PvP fits within Old School. We're using that to feed into an overall roadmap. We're not quite ready to publish that yet or get any kind of player validation on it, but we're getting to a stage where we're getting a lot closer to it. For us, it's about making sure that we're able to put the resource in the right times of the year to deliver the content that you want. So when we are ready to share it, it's a case of, this is what we're doing. Here's a good explanation as to why we're approaching it this way. And also, here's when you can expect updates. Because previously we've kind of done like a one and done approach to trying to fix different elements of PvP, but we want to give you like a big cohesive roadmap. So here's like some changes, here's some changes, here's new content, that kind of approach. Hundreds of suggestions coming in for actual individual bits of content, ! PvP ideas to be able to open the form to send us some more PvP ideas. Next week there will be a blog and a stream talking about Dark Maya. This would be in addition, maybe an extension to the normal Q&A. Yep. Death mechanics, we spent a lot of time at the start of the stream talking about death mechanics. Perhaps you're watching this back on, or perhaps you just joined us late, or you might be able to watch the stream back on YouTube or on a Twitch VOD. First 20 minutes or so, probably talking about death in quite some detail. ! Death to read the blog, and at the very top of the blog are quite an extensive list of changes we made since it was first published. Our proposal has changed quite significantly since we first published it, so definitely give it another read, or at least look at the changelog. And finally, of announcements, Old School RuneScape turned 7 years old on Saturday. There'll be a game update tomorrow with an event, an event for you to play through, and then on Friday the 21st, starting at 4 p.m. UTC and running till about 6 p.m. UTC, there will be a special live stream. It's going to be a good one. There will be we're going to talk about the last 7 years of Old School, some major events, major content. I think what I'd like to do is get quite explicit with not just the good stuff, but also, when times haven't been so good. There will be a community playthrough. There will be birthday events, so maybe hold off completing it tomorrow and play through with us on Friday. And a data stream. It's been a while since we've done one, and some of the stuff coming through from Mod Nasty and Mod Parish looks really, really good. And then we'll end that stream with JMod Hide and Seek, which I think Mod Ash and Mod Bruno will be running. So definitely tune in, 4 p.m. UTC until about 6 p.m. UTC. That is it for me in terms of announcements. So yeah, apologies we didn't quite get through as many questions as we'd hoped. We'll do that. We'll definitely answer the questions we've got listed here next week. And yeah, do take a read of the Death Mechanics blog and continue to give us your feedback. That's it from me. Anything else to offer?
No.
Cool. Thank you very much, Mod Tide and Mod John. And we'll see you guys next week.